We're going to have a look today at Aboriginal art and painting, which actually dates back 60,000 years, making it one of the oldest art traditions in the world. Now, as long as Indigenous people have been living in Australia, they've been creating different types of art. So, let's start by having a look at some examples of ancient art. It includes things like, as you can see here, rock paintings, bark paintings, even some sand drawings like this have been found. Then there's the whole area of body art, which is so important for ceremonial practice. And lastly, here are some examples of decorative art on weapons and tools. The oldest art examples today are the rock paintings because, obviously, rock is more durable than other materials, and so the art has been preserved. In fact, most of this work is inside caves, largely because there it's been sheltered, hasn't been destroyed by the weather, while the paintings on outside rock surfaces have often been washed away over the years. Now, there are enormous variations in the style of Aboriginal rock art, depending on its age and location. Dot paintings are one of the best-known visual art forms of Aboriginal culture, in which a surface is covered in small dots to reveal symbols. Typical ones include arrows like this. Here's a waterhole, and these are animal tracks. You get to see both the abstract dot paintings and more naturalistic art. You get both in rock art of various ages. As the ancient Aborigines didn't have a written language, the key purpose of much of this rock art was storytelling, which has had a great significance for younger generations. Let's move on to look at the materials. Whatever they were painting, traditionally Aboriginal people all over Australia used pigment, such as ochre, to make paint. Ochre's very finely textured natural rock and, they used this because ochre is plentiful across most of Australia. It's coloured by iron oxide, which is the mineral that makes a lot of Australian outback soil, in places such as Ayers Rock, what is known as Uluru Red. Uluru being the Aboriginal name for Ayers Rock. However, depending on the exact conditions under which it formed, the shade can be anything from yellow to orange, red, purple or dark brown. Today, ochre occurs in many archaeological sites, and archaeologists at one site have discovered what appears to be an artist's palette of ochres dating back 18,000 years. Preparing the ochre paints was time-consuming work. First, the appropriate rocks had to be found and collected. Then the rock had to be broken up and ground into a powder, and that had to be mixed with some sort of fluid to bind it into paint. Nowadays, the binder most commonly used is professional artists' acrylic binder. But in the past, Aboriginal people used things like tree sap or something similar like bush honey. Other fluids must also have been used, but wouldn't have held paint on rock or a piece of bark for thousands of years, so sadly, those paintings would have been lost. So, how have things changed? Well, modern Aboriginal is a mixture of the old and the new. Things changed in the 1970s, really, when Aboriginal people from many different parts of Australia, particularly South Australia, Central and Northern Australia, took up acrylic painting and began to paint on canvas. Taking a modern approach has had many advantages. It saves artists a great deal of time, and they can still choose to use the traditional yellowish, reddish, brownish colours if they wish to. But perhaps the most important fact is that, unlike bark and rock paintings, the modern paintings are easy to sell. In fact, painting on canvas has given Aboriginal people an opportunity to showcase their art to the world and keep their ancient culture alive. Modern Aboriginal art, particularly dot painting, has taken off and started selling on a big scale internationally. Aboriginal art can also be found on pottery and various musical instruments like didgeridoos and clapping sticks. Together, these have become some of the most popular souvenirs in Australia. Their artists, like other artists in the world, are now able to earn a living doing something they are passionate about. Hi, Milton. I didn't see you this afternoon. You missed a really good talk.
Oh, did I? That's a pity. It was Mr. Brand's talk about fossils, wasn't it?
Yeah, I hadn't really expected to enjoy it, but it was fascinating.
I thought it would be. I'd been planning to go to the talk, but then when I was in the lab this morning, I realised I hadn't done any reading for tomorrow's history seminar.
Well, I think he's going to repeat it sometime, but it may be next year.
Perhaps you could tell me a bit about it then.
Well, he talked about himself in the first part.
I saw on the notice that went round that he went to America to study and met a famous anthropologist.
Yeah, that's right. But he said he got interested in fossils well before then. When he was about 6, in fact, and he found the most amazing fossil on a school visit to a national park. He showed it to us. He still has it. Though he said he wasn't looking for it at the time.
Most kids wouldn't recognise a fossil if they saw one.
I know. They want to watch adventure films or play with model dinosaurs. But apparently he spent his school holidays hunting for fossils in the farm pits near his home.
So, does he lecture on the subject now?
Yes, but he also runs a business organising fossil hunts for groups of adults and children.
Oh, wouldn't it be great if we could do something like that?
He showed us a lot of pictures.
So they all go out in a group to the cliffs or somewhere with little hammers, do they?
Yeah, apparently. The kids tell everyone that's the best bit, tapping the stones to see if anything's there.
Do they know what they're looking for?
Yeah. They get shown some examples of what they might find first.
And do they actually get to find any fossils?
Yes. Mr. Brand showed some photos of children proudly holding up their fossils for the camera at the end of the day.
If they take them home, I bet they become prized possessions in their rooms as well.
For sure. He said he never stops being amazed at how close you can be to a fossil.
I guess the children aren't aware of history that much.
No, but for them, the key thing they learn is that if they keep looking, they will find something.
You have to wait. It's not for people who want instant success. So why don't we go on one of these hunts?
Well, yes, I'm quite keen. The hunts are fully booked until the end of the year, unfortunately.
I could talk to some of the other students and see if we can form a group.
Oh, that's a good idea. I'll give him a call. Then, if we have enough people, we might be able to get him to do an extra one for us.
I'll look on his website when I get back to the dorm, just to get a bit more information. So, what did he talk about in the second part?
Well, that was more theoretical, but just as interesting, and there were lots of visuals. You know how fossils are formed?
Not exactly. We all know they're the remains of living organisms, sort of entombed in rock, but I don't know how they get to be there.
Well, he basically went through the stages that make that happen.
So, did he talk about the conditions that bring about fossilisation?
Yes, and he used a fish as an example. Here, I'll show you my notes.
Oh, wow. These are great diagrams, Junie.
Thanks.
OK, stage 1. Ah, yes, that's right. A lot of fossils form underwater, don't they?
Yeah. Like, as soon as a fish dies, it sinks to the bottom of the ocean, and as long as a predator doesn't come along, it just lies there.
Undisturbed.
That's right.
And since the ocean bed's soft, well, much of it is, plus it's muddy as well, the fish gradually gets covered over and can't be seen anymore.
Apparently, for a fossil to begin to form, you also need conditions where the light is minimal and there's very little oxygen.
So the organic matter doesn't break down too quickly.
Yes. And there are fault lines, even on the seabed, and the rocks can move.
Yeah, so once the fish gets buried, I guess that has to happen quite quickly.
All the sand and sediment piles up into layers, and the huge pressure and weight of all the layers compacts it, and you move on to stage 2, where it gets heavier and heavier until it becomes hard rock.
There'd be no water left, so the fish skeleton would be entombed. It can stay like that for millions of years, can't it?
It can, but during that time, the bone in the skeleton is replaced by minerals.
I see. And these minerals sort of mimic the shape of the skeleton.
Yes, and that's how you get a fossil.
But how do we find them if they're buried so far down?
Again, it's all down to the movement of the Earth's plates. In the last stage, many millions of years after the fossil has formed, the rock may lift and eventually be above sea level.
Meanwhile, the surface of the rock wears away?
Yes. Another natural process called erosion wears away the rock until one day you can see the tip of the fossil.
And you break open the rock, and there it is.
It's incredible, really.
Actually, there are a number of objects that I could talk about in my home, so it's quite hard for me to decide what to choose. However, I'm going to talk about a very special necklace that I keep in my attic. First, I think I'll tell you where it came from. Basically, it was an inheritance from my grandmother, who was 95 years old when she died. As far as I know, she'd been given it by someone, possibly an aunt, who'd bought it in a market in India. It's a pity I didn't ask my grandmother. I'd know its origins for certain if I'd asked her. Anyway, undoubtedly it's pretty ancient now, probably an antique, although I've no idea what it's worth. But, as my mother says, you can't put a price on something that has sentimental value. If I were to lose it, I'd be really upset. Just looking at it, I don't think you get an idea of its age. You wouldn't realize how old it was unless you examined it closely. I wouldn't say that it's strikingly beautiful or something you'd choose to put on to go out for the evening. It's just a long line of blue beads that are quite chipped and faded now. They look pretty worthless, not as eye-catching as the gold necklace that I got for my 21st birthday. Actually, I don't use the beads for anything because, as I said earlier, I don't wear them. They're not at all fashionable. In fact, I don't really like beads, but having said that, I'll always keep them. If I were to throw the beads out, I wouldn't be able to forgive myself. I'll pass them on to my children so that they become an equally important family treasure for them. It's funny to think, but if it hadn't been for my granny's aunt, I wouldn't have inherited that necklace.